Macbeth Scene 2 introduces King Duncan. And again, we have first line of the scene is a question. What bloody man is that? Again, just stop, hit the brakes, and take a look at that. What bloody man is that? Couple things that we're learning in that, or at least that were being hinted at us. What bloody man is that? As we will see throughout the play, there are many bloody men. Duncan himself will become a very bloody man very quickly in this play. Macbeth himself will become a very bloody man with other people's blood and ultimately with his own by the end of the play. So that is very much a bit of a tell right there. What bloody man is that? Blood itself will be a continual reference throughout this play. There's some very famous hand-washing scenes. The most famous hand-washing scene, perhaps in English literature, perhaps of all times. Hand-washing. Who knew? But there were plenty of jokes among Shakespearean scholars throughout the COVID era, I assure you. What bloody man is that? Is also a sign of some concern. So, with Duncan's first line, he is showing concern and curiosity. He is essentially, we will learn, a nice guy. He's a decent king. He earns praises from practically everyone for being a mensch, basically, a good king, somebody who cares about other people. A little bit too much, quite frankly. He's too innocent. He can't conceive of betrayal. And so that is hinted at here. He is concerned for, he sees somebody coming up, a soldier who is all drenched in blood. So there's that right there. What bloody man is that? Also a question. Another question at the beginning of a scene, leading us on. The play is teasing us with little questions to try and get us in. It's a simple question on the surface. We just have to have somebody introduce us to this character who's on the other side of the stage, probably, and we learn who that is, and then, all right, we've got an answer. But in the meantime, that question was posed, and the play has moved on a little bit, and until we get that answer, it has drawn us in along on it. That simple sequencing of questions and responses and curiosities and new information, always leading us through the play in a very mechanistic way, quite frankly. What bloody man is that? He can report, as seemeth by his plight, of the revolt, the new estate. So we got a couple of things going on there. Of the revolt of the new estate. Of the revolt, there is a revolution happening, or at least a revolt happening. And he wants news. He is curious about the news, not just about the man, but of the information that he can provide. He can report as seemeth by his plight. Duncan is looking at this person and saying, he is covered in blood. He's dressed like a soldier. He's probably coming from a battle. I know there's a battle nearby about this revolt. I can get some information out of him. He is seeing somebody and drawing a conclusion based on their appearance. Appearance. Malcolm chimes in. This is the sergeant who, like a good and hearty soldier, fought against my captivity. Hail, brave friend! Say to the king the knowledge of the broil as thou didst leave it. So here we have an old stage, not just Shakespeare, but an old stage conceit of all the action that's really, really dramatic, like a war or a battle, all of that happening off stage. Shakespearean stages were kind of small. You can't really fit too much in them. Obviously, modern cinematic versions, you can go crazy with stuff like this and have, violent scenes of horses and sword fights and cannon and all of this stuff. Well, I think this is before the age of cannon, but, the real dramatic stuff. but that hint that, okay, here's a guy, he looks like hell. He looks like he's really been beat up. He can at least give us the state of the battle. Tell us like what's happening. And I personally find this very funny. The captain is covered in blood, probably been having a bad day, and you would expect him to be maybe a little winded, maybe a little tired, a little worn down. Like, ugh, ugh. And an actor can really ham that up a little bit and make like, oh, trudging across the stage, limping like on death's door kind of stuff. Oh. And then he gives, when asked for a report, this worn out, blood covered man, speaking to the king, blossoms in the attention and takes advantage of that cheesy moment to make it a little dramatic. Doubtful it stood as two spent swimmers that do cling together and choke their art, the merciless MacDonald, worthy to be a rebel, for to that the multiplying villainies of nature do swarm upon him. From the western isles of kerns and gallowglasses it's applied, and fortune, on his damned quarrel smiling, showed like a rebel's whore. But all's too weak, for brave Macbeth, well he deserves that name, disdaining fortune, with his brandished steel which smoked with bloody execution, like valor's minion carved out his passage, till he faced the slave, which ne'er shook hands nor bade farewell to him, till he unseamed him from the nave to the chops, and fixed his head upon our battlements. A little dramatic, a little overwrought. Not what you would expect of somebody who's just, limping out of a battle. But he gets inspired by being able to talk to his king. And he tells this bloody story, which is going to be very thrilling, of the battle. And it's about it's about fending off against a traitor. There is a rebellion against Duncan, and his forces have seemingly put them down, primarily led by this soldier Macbeth. For brave Macbeth, well, he deserves that name. The name Macbeth, which has already been mentioned here, is significant because the name is a kind of brand that they're going by. So they mention it. Well, he deserves that name, that description, brave Macbeth. It's a bumper sticker more than an identity. It is an outward appearance more than an interior human being. Brave Macbeth is our first understanding of him, violent and bloody. Brave Macbeth, disdaining fortune with brandished steel, which smoking with bloody execution like valor's minion, carved out his passage till he faced the slave. Holding his sword, sliced through everybody in his way until he got to the leader, the chief rebel, which never shook hands with nor bade farewell to him, till he unseamed him from the nave, the navel, the belly button, to the chops. I'm not going to get too visceral on this, but essentially just slice this man in two. A grisly, bloody, disgusting act. An act of a soldier, perfectly justifiable in the context of war. But what does that do to a man? Or what does that say about a man who can do that? And what does it do to a man once he has done that? It's opening up some possibilities here. But that first stirring image of him as this lion thrashing through. It's thrilling. It's kind of like seeing Achilles in the Iliad, where we're told he is just ripping through everything in front of him, and we want to see him kick butt. We want to see him rip these people apart. They're the bad guys. He's the good guy. We're on the side of the good guy, so let's see him kick some ass. But the note that Shakespeare strikes here is so grisly. From the knave to the chops, and fixed his head upon our battlements, cut off the man's head, and put it on the wall outside the city, essentially, outside the castle, which is a fairly standard medieval practice to warn other rebels. This was going on in England for quite a while. Up into Shakespeare's time. If you were a rebel and the authorities wanted to make an example of you, they cut off your head and they stuck it on a pike outside the castle so that everybody walking by would see it up there for weeks on end, picked at by birds. And they would think, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to challenge the king. But here we have Macbeth doing this. And because it's so stirring, we're kind of in on it. It's like, yeah, this image of this towering soldier just being so violent within a justifiable context. We find ourselves kind of titillated. We find ourselves kind of leaning in, getting thrilled. Kind of like the way we were thrilled watching The Witches. The witches are evil, but we're kind of drawn to it. It's like, yeah, that's really, really fun stuff. It's really sexy stuff. But here we're seeing war and grisly violence, but we're kind of being titillated in the same way. Repulsed on certain levels too, certainly, but also it's like, yeah, you want to see it. So Shakespeare is pushing and pulling the audience into this new position where you're getting thrilled with it, but then discovering, hey, wait a minute, that's kind of, what does that say about me that I'm getting thrilled by something so evil, so ugly? And we get all this exposition from this captain. Exposition is the context and the backstory and everything that's been going on. All that you need to know about the rebel situation. And again, it's very funny to me that this guy is near death's door, but he's always soaring off with his giant rhetoric and stuff like this. And at the end, Duncan is like, yeah, okay, let's get him off to a doctor. That's enough of him. He's still declaiming to the cheap seats all over the place. You know, I thought you were dying, pal. Get on with it. But you learn about how Macbeth is the hero. He has put down this rebellion, and now Duncan is grateful to him. Macbeth has earned the praise and appreciation of the king, always a valuable political position to be in. And in fact, the king says, I'm going to make him my new Thane of Cawdor. You are the Thane, which is a royal title. Roughly equal to Earl in English, the England, an Earl, dukes and earls and all of that. A Thane is like an Earl, roughly equivalent, and he is going to be promoted essentially from Thane of Cawdor, which is essentially a relatively small area, to, I would imagine, or Glamis is a relatively small area, and I'd imagine Cawdor is a much larger and more prestigious one. So he's getting the he's getting the job and the promotion from the guy he just killed. He has earned this distinction. And it is a sign that, that Duncan is appreciative, that Duncan feels generous to him and is generous by nature. He resents the betrayer, he resents the rebel, and he is very happy to take the stuff, take the title and all the lands and all the wealth away from that man and put him to death. He'll be dead in another 2 scenes, I think. But he doesn't hoard that to himself. He shares that, bestows that upon Macbeth, whom he now embraces. And that's a kind act. That's a benevolent act. He doesn't necessarily know Macbeth very well at this stage, but he is trusting him so much. He's opening up his heart, and that's kind of his undoing. When Macbeth walks in, he says his first line, "So fair and foul a day I have not seen." This is scene 3. So fair and foul a day I have not seen. That's a direct rhyme of the witches from the first scene. Fair is foul and foul is fair. So he's entering, we don't know anything about him. His first line is reminiscent of the witches and calling us back and creating that parallel example, that comparison that happens immediately. What do these 2 things have in common with one another? Well, we're going to have to learn about that. Fair, foul. 2 sides of the same coin. One thing looks like one thing, but is actually its opposite. Difference in appearance and reality. Fair and foul a day I have not seen. Also, I would say notably, a statement, an opinion. If the witches come in with a question and Duncan begins scene 2 with a question, here Macbeth enters with a statement. He's a little different. Maybe he's less curious. Maybe he isn't concerned necessarily that it's fair and foul at the same time. He's just noting it. Doesn't really care what's behind that. Doesn't really think about what that could mean. So fair and foul a day I have not seen. Contradictions. That will be a big issue as this play progresses. And he is walking with Banquo, his equal, essentially, at this point. They're friends, and they're just coming back from the battle themselves. You can imagine that they are kind of sweaty and bloody and beaten up themselves. They're coming in upon the witches. The witches are dancing around again, very theatrically again, drawing people in. Longer speeches now. The first little hit was very close up in scene 1. Now it can get a little bit more elaborate. Banquo goes to them and tries to ask them directions, essentially. Asking, again, a question. He comes in with a question as well. I just wonder if this is a pattern. I don't know. How far is it to Forest? What are these, so withered and wild in their attire that look not like the inhabitants of the earth, and yet are on it? Live you, or are you aught that man may question? You seem to understand me, by each at once her choppy finger laying upon her skinny lips. You should be women, and yet your beards forbid me to interpret that you are so. A little coarse humor there. older women perhaps, and you get a little facial hair coming out sometimes, and these things happen. These things happen. Waxing wasn't a particularly good thing back then, or a popular thing. So it's a little bit of a jab, but let's just look at that speech a little bit more too. Begins with a question, begins with a specific question. Where are we, and how do we get somewhere we want to go? Something very specific. I like the where are we, always trying to get a sense of where everything is at Banquo, but also where do we go? It is targeted, it is progressive, it is intentional. What are these so withered and so wild in their attire? In their attire, in their clothes. We're going to see a lot of mention of clothes in this play. Clothes that fit well or don't fit well. The way something looks, appearances, is very, very important in this play. So again, this is coming up. That look not like the inhabitants of the earth, not like the inhabitants of the earth. And again, remember the very beginning of the play of scene one, where you're not sure if they are of thunder and lightning and rain. Are they an element of nature? Are they opposed to nature? Here, they are outside of nature. They are outside of the earth itself, or at least in appearance. These are conclusions that Banquo is trying to draw based on their appearance. This is important. Live you, or are you aught that man may question? Are you even alive? Are you even human? You seem to understand me by each at once her choppy fingers laying upon her skinny lips. Here, choppy fingers laying upon his skinny lips. Perhaps they are signaling to one another to be quiet. They don't want to talk to Banquo. Maybe they want to talk to Macbeth. I don't know. You don't get, in Shakespeare plays, you don't get stage directions, so you have to attend to the what the dialogue says other characters are doing, and that can lead you to some conclusions. But then you get the witch's great prophecy. Witch number 1, all hail Macbeth, hail to thee, Thane of Glamis. Witch 2, all hail Macbeth, hail to thee, Thane of Cawdor. Progression. Witch 3, all hail Macbeth, that shalt be king hereafter. And there you go. This trio of mysterious figures, possibly devil worshippers of some sort. Witches have all sorts of weird connections. Weird, huh? But they are predicting the future. They're not saying that he has to do anything. They're just saying this will happen. This will be. This status will come to be. And that is that he was Thane of Cawdor. He was Thane of Glamis. He will become Thane of Cawdor. He hasn't been officially appointed yet, or at least he hasn't been told. And immediately following that prediction comes, you will be king. Whoa. What does that do? Hearing that from a source that is, let's face it, not really reliable, but that's a mighty big nut to crack that's just clunked on top of you. And in fact, again, we don't know what he does exactly from his own actions. We know from Banquo. Good sir, why do you start and seem to fear things that do sound so fair? In the name of truth, are ye fantastical, or that indeed which outwardly you show? We don't see, at least on the page, we don't see Macbeth. We only see the reflection of his reaction through Banquo. And Banquo is looking at him and trying to make sense of it, trying to make sense of his appearance. Now, maybe Macbeth is, wide-eyed and, jaw dropped on the floor. Maybe the actor is really hamming it up. I don't know. Maybe he's staggering. But Shakespeare presents this as a kind of bank shot where we're told about it through another character trying to read his appearance, trying to interpret what the signs, the outward appearance of his face means. And that's kind of the bit that, well, that's kind of the play, quite frankly. That confusion over appearance and reality, the sign and the meaning. The same witches follow along right after and tell Banquo that your kids will be kings too. Lesser than Macbeth and greater, which 2, not so happy yet much happier. 3, thou shalt get kings though thou be none, so all hell Macbeth and Banquo. They never say that Macbeth is going to have kids or that his kids are going to become kings. They do say that Banquo will have kids and they will become kings. Banquo already has kids. And remember, if you are King James watching this, you're thinking, hey, his kids, that's me, down the line. But that tension is immediately posited. And Macbeth is intrigued. Macbeth says, stay, you imperfect speakers, tell me more. By Sinel's death I know I am Thane of Glamis, but how of Cawdor? The Thane of Cawdor lives, a prosperous gentleman, and to be king stands not within the prospect of belief, no more than to be Cawdor. Say from whence you owe this strange intelligence, or why upon this blasted heath you stop our way with such prophetic greeting. Speak, I charge you. And they vanish. I love that speak, I charge you, that command. He is a commander. He is a military commander, and he is, he is a royal. And he is about to become a king, as we shall soon find out. So the idea of command suits him well. It's almost like he was raised into it, like King James. But you can see also in that a kind of immediate curiosity for what's going to happen to him. He doesn't really care so much who they are. He says, referencing, you imperfect speakers, tell me more. Why would you want to learn more from somebody who you can't trust at all? But no, you told me something about me. I want to hear about me. What is going to happen to me? You can see that lust for knowledge of the future getting kindled within him. And he's trying to work it out. He's rationalizing it and saying, well, no, that can't be right. He's trying to take control of this information and objectify a little bit and say, well, no, how could you know that? I know that I am Glamis. I have no reason to believe that I am Cawdor. The king or the Thane of Cawdor still lives, so therefore I can't be him. And the king thing just makes no sense whatever. You can see his mind struggling against this lust that has been kindled, that compromise between the animal nature of man and the ideal nature of man, the humanism that is ripping him apart in this moment. Right when he first learns, that passion is teased out of him and he is suddenly hooked. And the core of the plot is engaged from there. The king's messenger comes in and tells them that this is going to be, that he has been made Cawdor, and Macbeth is sort of shocked, and Banquo is kind of concerned, and they're sort of shooting looks back and forth at one another, saying, how are we doing? As the messenger is sitting there just delivering his news, and Macbeth says this as an aside to the audience, not to anybody on stage. This supernatural soliciting cannot be ill, cannot be good. If ill, why hath it given me earnest of success, commencing in a truth? I am Thane of Cawdor. If good, why do I yield to that suggestion whose horrid image doth unfix my hair and make my seated heart knock at my ribs against the use of nature? Present fears are less than horrible imaginings. And then he goes on. But just notice immediately the equivocation there. This supernatural soliciting, the acts of the witches, cannot be ill and it cannot be good. It's one or the other. No, it can be both. I don't know. What difference? Evil and good are all the same. Like, que sera. That sense of being amoral, of not having a strong moral core to receive and process this information, you could call that his fatal flaw, if you will. If you want to simplify, distill the core of this drama, there are problems with that, but it's a fair conclusion to draw in your first pass through. But you can see the lust. You can see the greed, the ambition, the very idea of what's to come is kindled in him, and he is hooked from here. And he and Banquo have to separate right there, and they agree. All right, now we're going to talk about this later, but let's just go with it and keep it let's keep all that witch stuff on the down low for now. We'll meet together at a later date and we'll talk about this, which is another tease of the future. Just like the witches in scene 1. The idea that we're going to come together and work things out at a later date. The future. This meeting where they're going to work things out never really takes place. And that conflict between the way the two of them reacted to this news is going to kindle into something very, very violent. And well, by this point, the audience is hooked. The audience has a mystery to solve. The audience is curious about the future as well. The future of this play, very explicitly. How does it turn out? What happens next? These are natural human emotions, curiosities. Is everything that I am seeing really what's going on? What else could it mean? I have all of this information in front of me, all of these clues scattered about. What do they mean? How can I connect them so that I can make sense of what I see? That's the play.